In the 1700s, the entire Niagara Peninsula was considered a strategic military location by the British, the French, and the Americans. The French gave up control to the British during the French and Indian Wars, but in 1796, after the Revolutionary War, the British were forced to relinquish Niagara's eastern peninsula to the Americans. This included Fort Niagara, the French-built fortress that overlooked Lake Ontario and was known as the French Castle. And so the British began construction of Fort George, on the opposite side of the river, on its western bank. They already had barracks and early settlements on land purchased from the native nations. But they wanted to maintain a highly visible British presence directly across the river from the Americans. Fort George became the headquarters of the British Army in Upper Canada. The British also built an Indian council house near Fort George on military land known as the Commons. The site was an administration centre and a powerful and significant meeting ground. Hundreds of natives, sometimes thousands, would gather for annual meetings. They shared stories, rituals, gift-giving, and speeches. It showed a strong chain of friendship and alliance between the native nations and the British Indian Department. All this contributed to the military importance of Niagara. The War of 1812 added to Niagara's significance, but also stretched the alliance with the native nations. Lessons had been learned during the war, and after, both the Americans and the British regrouped. For many in Upper Canada, the fear of another American invasion was still very real. Fort George was rebuilt and briefly reoccupied, while two new military installations were constructed, Fort Mississauga and Butler's Barracks. Fort Mississauga, with its massive stone and brick tower, was intended to be a stronghold guarding the mouth of the Niagara River. Butler's Barracks was built on the Commons as a supply depot out of cannon range from the American shore, or so they hoped. National tempers flared again during the Mackenzie Rebellion of 1837, the American Civil War, and the Fenian raids in 1866. But peace prevailed. However, Upper Canada had a long memory. The Fenian raids proved that borders had to be defended. After Confederation in 1867, Canada became more serious about its military training. Niagara Camp was established on the Commons, still military land, but now surrounded by the old town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara Camp became the primary military training ground for central Ontario. When the First World War was declared, Niagara Camp received thousands of new recruits for basic training. As Niagara watched with some apprehension, the Commons was transformed. Trenches were built. Dugouts appeared with barbed wire and sandbags. A field hospital complete with an operating room, bell tents in their thousands, the sounds of rifle and machine gun training, horses, wagons, and men marching filled the town. These young men were being prepared for a new method of warfare in Europe. And as the town became filled with military urgency, a patriotic zeal spread through the local population. Then in 1917, more than 22,000 Polish-American volunteers arrived to train at Niagara Camp. Their objective? To fight for a free Poland. Their camp was renamed Camp Kosciuszko. Throughout the town there were Polish signs, Polish language books, Polish entertainment, and soldiers billeted in every spare room, barn, and even the town hall. But in the late summer of 1918, the Spanish flu epidemic came to Niagara. 33 Polish soldiers died. Many were buried in the St. Vincent de Paul Church Cemetery, on land donated by the church. After the war, Niagara Camp was used once again, only for summer training. It would take another world war to bring the camp back to full activity.
I appeal to my fellow Canadians to unite in a national effort to save from destruction all that makes life itself worth living, and to preserve for future generations those liberties and institutions which others have bequeathed to us.
And in 1939, Canada entered World War II. At Camp Niagara, as it was now called, stables were converted to garages and workshops. The cavalry gave way to tanks and truck convoys. A new hospital was built. Healthcare was as much a part of training as discipline and good communication. Men and women marched and drilled together. And this time, the training also focused on homeland security. Nearly 2 million Canadian servicemen and women fought in World War I and II. Almost 200,000 of those were trained at Camp Niagara. After the war, it slowly returned to a summer militia camp. But one event in 1955 brought the world here. Niagara hosted the 8th World Scout Jamboree, the first time it was ever hosted outside of Europe. Butler's Barracks in Camp Niagara was home to more than 11,000 scouts from 71 nations. The camp was once again bursting with young military pride.
The main gate to the Jamboree. The tents are up. Communications have been set up to link the entire camp. Everyone is on the alert, for this is opening day. Masses of scouts and visitors wait expectantly in the great arena. They wait for the arrival of Canada's Governor-General. There is the official car carrying the Chief Scout of Canada to the opening ceremony. The Scottish pipers march into the arena to take up their positions at the head of the parade. The units are lined up and ready. Every seat in the huge outdoor stadium is taken. Over 20,000 people attended the opening ceremony. The first Canadian-born Governor-General is an enthusiastic scout. He's proud of the traditions of scouting and feels keenly his responsibility as Chief Scout for Canada.
But by the 1960s, most of Camp Niagara's buildings had been moved or demolished. Activity now reflected the Cold War emphasis on national survival. In 1966, Camp Niagara was officially closed after 95 years of military training. Here in Canada, we honour our military history each year on Remembrance Day, November the 11th, at this memorial clock tower on Queen Street in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The tower was built in 1922 and financed from the sale of victory bonds. Their contributions are not forgotten. Military pride has deep roots here in Niagara. It is indeed a proud military town.